to today's program, you have probably heard Willy Bearden speak in New Albany. He's spoken for us several times, and you may remember that he's a Delta boy from Rolling Fork. He now lives in Memphis. And when you read his autobiography, he makes it sound so much fun to be in Rolling Fork when you're 10 years old and at the Joy Theater. I think that's probably where he became such a good storyteller, is because he saw these great movies when he was a kid, and so a great storyteller he is in many ways. He's a filmmaker, a documentary maker, an author, a podcast host. He's created films on many things, like who knew you could make a film on the art of smoking cigars? Well, I know you could on the cotton industry in Memphis, visualizing the blues. And he recently worked with Morgan Freeman on the Symphonic Blues project that's now traveling all over the world. Willie also helped us with our sports story. If you haven't seen the intro film to that, it'll make you cry when you see it. It's so good. And so when you have a story you think needs to be told, go get Willie, because he can do a great job. And so much of what he does is creative preservation. And he makes people feel the story. So join me in welcoming Willy Bearden.
Thank you, Jill. It's been my pleasure to work with Jill for the past few years. And let me tell you, I do a lot of this kind of work. And there is nobody more on and more creative than Jill. So I want to have a big round of applause. I always think, when I do a lot of speaking and things, and I love doing that. I love talking with people, and because I always walk away with some good stories and some new friends. I'm always thinking about when I was a senior in high school down in Rolling Fork, in what we call the Deep Delta. I was standing in the hall one morning, and I was probably talking. I'm sure I was talking. And Mr. Mullins, who was our principal, came up, and he was one of those guys who would kind of put his arm around you, but he'd pinch you a little too hard, and he said, he kind of pinched my shoulder pretty good, and he said, Willy Bearden, if you keep running your mouth, you're never going to amount to anything. Well, so let me say this. I've been running my mouth for money for years, and I'm doing pretty good. It's good for business. So thank you, Mr. Mullins. I do get the opportunity to work on a lot of projects. I've done a lot of museums around our region here, and it's been really a lot of fun. I've done 3 big projects for the Elvis Presley Birthplace Museum right down the road here. We did, the first thing we did was, think about 2006, and we redid the original museum. And they, brought me in and said, tell me what you think about this. And I walked through. I said, I'd just like to go through by myself. So I'll come down here before y'all open your doors. Just let me walk through by myself, and I want to spend half an hour, however long. And so I did, and there was a chair, an ugly chair that had belonged to Elvis, and a couple of shirts that were Elvis's, and some album covers, and a few other things, but not a whole lot. And so when I, walked through, they said, what'd you think? And I thought, well, Elvis is not in the building, certainly not Tupelo Elvis. So we started thinking about, how do you do this? And so we made 2 films that year. One was about what North Mississippi was like in 1935 when Elvis was born, because I thought that people coming from all parts of the globe, they needed to be grounded in this information. Most of them already knew about Elvis Presley. They knew about Sun Records. They knew about Blue Hawaii. They knew about all of these things that Elvis had done, but they didn't know where he started from. So we did that film, and we did another film about his musical influences. And I felt like we got a really good start on that. So the next thing they got us to do, they found the church where Elvis went to church as a boy. somebody was living in that. It was actually a duplex, and it was tiny. But the museum bought that and moved it up to their grounds there. We went in and recreated a 1940s church service there, an Assembly of God church service. And if you've never been in there, it's pretty cool. You walk in, and these screens come down on either side and in the front, and you are sitting there in a church service. We've got a gospel quartet. We got a little Elvis actor that comes up and sings "Jesus Loves Me" and all this. So I've done several projects for them over the years, and it's one of those things. I always think that I was meant to do this. When I first started in my career making films and writing, I was doing corporate work, and I did that for the first 10 years I had my company. So I did every kind of training film you can imagine in your life. If you ever need to open a Fred's Dollar Store, give me a call. I did all their training stuff. I know how to do that stuff. I did FedEx. Like, I can't tell you how many films I wrote and did for them. And just on and on and on. And I finally had the realization one day that I felt like I had a good point of view. I felt like talking to people and looking at different situations that I could explain things to people. And about that time was the first time I did my first documentary, which was on cigars. Actually, I went to the Dominican Republic in 1993 because cigars were getting to be a thing. They started opening all these cigar bars and things. So I called the greatest family of cigar makers in the world, the Fuente family. And somehow they said, yes, come on down to the Dominican Republic and you can shoot a film on us. So I did that. I went down there twice in 93 and we finished the film. And it was very successful. Time Life Home Video, which was the biggest home video distributor back then, when we had VHS tapes. They bought it from me, or actually licensed it from me, so that really got me thinking. So I really started kind of leaning into telling these stories. About that time was when people started doing more local museums. And so we did the Tunica River Park down by the casinos in Tunica. I did the Blues Hall of Fame, which is on South Main Street in Memphis. I had been producing their Blues Music Awards show since 1998, so I think I just did my 28th show about 3 weeks ago. And the Blues Hall of Fame, and we've probably, since that time I've been doing their films, I've written and done videos for probably 350 either performers, songs, albums, books, and all this. So I've learned to do this, and it's been so much fun doing this. When I came down here and talked to Jill, I guess it was 3 years ago, or maybe before, no, 4 or 5 years ago, because I had come down here and spoken a couple of times. And but what I saw here is that I saw a town, a county that was deliberate. And let me tell you, you are different from most places I go because of your being deliberate about things. You're intentional about doing things. And let me tell you, that is a rare thing in this world today. I hope you know how rare and special that is, because all of you make this. There are towns that have withered and died that we could go to in the next half hour. We could hit 3 or 4 of them. And that's like that in the Mississippi Delta. That's like that really all over this country. And what's happened is that people have forgotten who they were because they didn't have people talking about these things. They didn't document the people who had the stories. You don't have to be a PhD. You don't have to have a master's degree in history to do these kinds of things. All you have to do is be a person of goodwill who wants to share your story. And that's what you folks have done. And I'm so proud to be a part of that in helping people who come into this museum really get it. And sometimes you got about 10 minutes to hook somebody in to make sure they get it. So that's, when I do a film like this, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to think, let me get the best 10 minutes I can put on the screen and make them start thinking. I'm not going to give them all the answers, but hopefully we'll tee it up to where they walk out of there and go, man, I'm glad I saw that. Because with this kind of work, with museum work, I always approach it in this way. I always think, okay, I'm driving up to a museum. I see a car come up to a museum. There are 4 people in that car. The person driving is right where they want to be on the planet that day. Just let me tell you, they are right where they want to be. The other 3 people have questions, and they're going, why did you talk me into this? How much does it cost? What are we going to have for lunch? So I always think about, I'm not here for the person who is so passionate about this and who has read books and all that. I'm looking to turn on those other 3 people who don't want to be there. And if I can, and when those 3 people walk out, the only thing I really ever think about is I hope they said, well, that wasn't too bad. I enjoyed that. So that's what we're trying to do here. And to say that y'all have a good story is an understatement. Because other places have not uncovered all these things. Other people have not said these things out loud. And this museum does that. It says those things out loud. It's not just somebody talking, well, you know, so-and-so he was some kind of writer. I don't know what he did, but, you know, he was some kind of writer. He was right. Well, nobody knows that. You folks have said it out loud. You've said it out loud in a place where people can go and access these memories and save this for future generations. I'm telling you, a lot of my work has to do with the fact that somebody took a picture. I always show this picture when I do a talk. There's this picture of downtown Memphis, this Main Street, and it's this beautiful, beautiful picture. Everything is in focus. So it had to be one of and it was taken in 1893, okay? So whoever took that picture, and I don't even know who it was, but somebody took that picture. They did not reach into their pocket and pull their phone out and take this picture. They had to have a big tripod. They had an 8x10 view camera that you got to throw the cloth over your head to do. They had to set that up. It was very expensive because those were glass plates that you had to put in these things. Had to be very, very careful with that. Then they had to be, you know, processed and all. So it was a big deal to take one picture. But somebody took that picture. And I always think about whoever that person was who took that picture, I guarantee you their buddy was there with them, maybe helping them carry the tripod or something. And he probably turned to the guy who was taking the picture and going, why are you taking this? Anybody can see this. And on that day in 1893, anybody could have seen that. Anybody who walked out of a business, anybody who came down the street in a horse and buggy, they could see that. But you know what? That has lasted well over a century, 130 years now. Because somebody took that picture, which, when I found that picture and hundreds, really thousands of other pictures, those pictures go into my films to explain things to people. Because most people are visual. I mean, you can sit here and tell people all day, well, the blah, 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 it looked like this and all that. People don't get it until they see something. And the other thing I found out is that when people get this information, story, picture, whatever, it becomes theirs. I can't tell you how many times I've been like at a party or something, and somebody will walk up to me and tell me, like I was at a party at the Overton Park Golf House, this 5 or 6 years ago, and I think 4 different people came up to me that night and told me something about Overton Park, which is our big park in Memphis. They told me something almost verbatim what I had written in the film and my book. Now, of course, I didn't say, hey, I wrote that. You don't do that. But they had read this and it had become a part of them. And when they saw me, they thought, I think Willie knows something about it. Let me tell him this. So you pass this information along to people in a way that it's a gift to them. And it becomes part of who they are. And let me tell you, there's a lot of people out in the world today who don't want to hear things. And you can tell who those people are. But the people who do want to hear things and know how our world works and know how our communities work and know how people work, those are the people that take this information and then they pass it on too. So I just don't think, I never knew what I was going to be when I was a kid. I never had any dreams about what I was going to do. But when I got in this business in 1978, it was the first thing I had ever done that really made sense to me. And years ago, maybe 1998, I had a thing, the first thing I ever had on television. It was called Visualizing the Blues, and it was a photography program that was put together by the Dixon Gallery and Gardens in Memphis. And it became a traveling exhibition, and it traveled for 5 or 6 years. But that was on WKNO, our PBS station in Memphis. The next day, I got back from lunch and I checked my answering machine. Anybody remember what answering machines are? Okay. I checked the machine and this voice came on and said, Mr. Bearden, this is Shelby Foote. I sure enjoyed what you had on TV last night. I hope you do more of that kind of work. Please give me a call. Well, the first thing I thought is, which idiot friend of mine is trying to talk like Shelby Foote? I never thought Shelby Foote would call me, but I called the number and it was Shelby Foote, one of the greatest storytellers of our time or any time. And we started talking. And we got to be friends on the phone. And after that, every time I would have something on TV, he would call me. And I just, and this happened, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 times. But he would call me and we'd talk for a little bit about what I had on TV, but really what he wanted to talk about was Rolling Fork, because his father and grandfather were from Rolling Fork. And so, he would tell me all these things. He still remembered people from Rolling Fork. And I was just, his encouragement did everything for me, because he always encouraged me. He always said, that storytelling is the highest art. I said, okay, I do believe that. So he died in 2005. The year before, I went over to his house and interviewed him. And we did it, he didn't want to do video, we just did an audio interview. And I went over, spent like 3 hours with him, and we were in his writing room. And he had this beautiful library. And he wrote, you're not going to believe this, but this is the truth. He wrote standing at a lectern just like this. Standing. And he wrote with a pen that was dipped in a bottle of ink. And I was looking at what was on the lectern, and I couldn't read his handwriting, but I guess he could. But I said, wow, I didn't know you wrote with a dipped pen. He said, oh yeah. And he said, how many words can you write a day? I said, I don't know, I write, 2,000, maybe 3,000 words a day if I'm getting it. He went, oh Lord, he said, I'm doing lucky if I can do 250 words a day. He said, but I don't like to scratch anything out. And I thought, oh, that's good. So I started thinking about, he had written that 3-volume set, that 3-volume history of the Civil War. There are over 1 million words in those 3 volumes. Think about that. And he wrote those at 250 words a pop. Took him years to do it. So, when I was getting all my gear together, we had talked, and it was really a wonderful, wonderful day. I listened to those tapes sometimes, and I could always hear, as he smoked a pipe, he'd pull his Zippo out, you'd hear this click, a big click on the phone, just lighting his pipe up. So we were finished, and I'm loading up my gear, and he said, "What time is it?" I looked at my watch and said, "It's about 1:45." He said, "Oh, good, I can watch my story." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, as the world turns." And I said, "What?" He said, "I've been watching As the World Turns for the last 50 years. And I thought to myself, yeah, of course you have. I don't know why it stunned me so much, but of course you have, because he loved the story. So many years after he died, probably 10 years after he died, I was reading the Commercial Appeal one morning, and they had a little blurb in there, and they said, "Today is the last broadcast episode of As the World Turns." And I thought, I got to set my DVR for that, because I was thinking about Mr. Foote. So I set my DVR, and that night after dinner, I went up and I turned the thing on. Now, folks, let me tell you, I never watched As the World Turns. My mother watched it, and my grandmother watched it, so I'm sure I was in and out of the room as a kid, or maybe homesick from school, and maybe saw it. But I did not actively remember knowing anything about As the World Turns. Well, that night I turned the thing on, and I'm telling you, it took me about 3 minutes to get caught up with the story. That's got to be the slowest story in the history of storytelling. But I thought to myself, this is kind of completing the circle for me, in seeing that this man loved the story, and now this is over, and I get to watch this and think of him. And so every time I get to do a talk, I always thank Shelby Foote for the encouragement he gave me to do what I do. And I guess that leads us to say, I would like to show you the new film for the Creative Spirits exhibition that's going to be here, and I really hope you'll like this. I had a great time sitting in the little dark room for several weeks and building this thing about 6 seconds at a time. So it's really been fun. I thank you for having me today. And are we ready with the film? Did somebody say yeah? Okay, I don't know who that is. No, I'm kidding. All right, are we ready? Yeah. Let's hit it.
There's a certain quality that for a little while in the month of August light has, that it has at no other time.
There's something in this native soil, something in the rhythm of the land, the stories passed across porches, the hymns sung in churches, the books read under shade trees, the sketches made on notebook paper. Union County, Mississippi is not a large place, but from this small corner of the world has come an astonishing flow of creativity. Writers, musicians, designers, historians, architects, bakers, storytellers. Some became famous. Others changed lives close to home. All began somewhere right here.
Long before county lines were drawn, creativity lived here. This land is part of the Chickasaw homeland. Flint points, beadwork, crafted tools, and modern Chickasaw art remind us that imagination has always found expression here. Each generation builds on the last. This is how culture survives. This is how creativity grows.
On Jefferson Street in New Albany, a quiet boy named William Faulkner was born in 1897. He listened more than he spoke. He absorbed family stories, local characters, the weight of history, the beauty and burden of Mississippi life. From those roots, he created Yoknapatawpha County, one of literature's greatest imagined worlds. He became Mississippi's only Nobel Prize winner in literature, and later won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Yet Faulkner never forgot where the stories began, in what he once called his postage stamp of native soil. Influenced by family stories and the rhythms of Mississippi life, Faulkner transformed local memory into universal art. Even his struggles became part of the legend. His stepson Malcolm once remembered how Faulkner fought creative frustration by attacking bitter weeds in the pasture with a hoe. The man who wrote of endurance wrestled daily with himself. And still, his words endure. A line from his Nobel Prize speech echoes across generations. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail.
Union County gave rise to many powerful voices. Borden Deal grew up during the Depression, reading anything he could find, even catalogs when books were scarce. From hardship came discipline. From memory came 21 novels and more than 100 short stories. Martha Swain became a pioneering historian, preserving Southern stories and opening doors for women scholars. Stephanie Saul went from editing a school newspaper in New Albany to winning the Pulitzer Prize and writing for the New York Times. Different paths, same beginning. Curiosity encouraged early.
In Union County, creativity often had a beat. Churches became training grounds for young voices and young hearts. Elder Roma Wilson turned discarded harmonicas into instruments of joy. His sound, born from necessity and spirit, would eventually earn him the nation's highest honor in folk arts. Beside him stood Reverend Leon Pinson, nearly blind and partially crippled, but full of music. Together they traveled roads across Mississippi and beyond, carrying faith through song. Wilson once said, "I don't have the blues, I have only joy." And joy traveled with them wherever they played.
As times changed, the sounds changed too. Sam Mosley and Bob Johnson grew up in segregated Mississippi, but music crossed lines others would not. From church pews and garage bands came Southern soul and funk that reached audiences around the world. They toured Europe, played major festivals, and wrote songs recorded by music legends.
And then there were the garage bands, teenagers with guitars, borrowed amplifiers, and impossible dreams. When the Dukes earned a chance to appear on national television, the entire community helped send them to New York. That belief matters. Sometimes encouragement is the spark that changes everything. Steamboat Fulton, a telegraph operator on the railroad, picked up discarded gin bottles and created the Ginophone, where he played tunes that took him all the way to Hollywood and The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, with his hometown proudly watching. Bobby Wood learned to play piano by ear in Union County churches. He went on to play with Elvis Presley, Ray Charles, Johnny Cash, and countless others. More than 100 records he worked on reached the Billboard charts. His songs became a part of American music history. Now younger generations continue the tradition.
Gracie Williams began playing guitar at age 8 and is already carrying the family spark forward. And another young musical creative, Dawson Horn, is carrying his Elvis tributes to audiences all over the place. Zeke Listenby, mentored by local musicians, became a Grammy nominee and Dove Award winner. The melody continues.
Creativity here was never limited to one form. Hudson Hickman built a career in Hollywood producing television seen by millions and Emmy-winning projects featuring Dolly Parton. Gail Kirkpatrick left New Albany for New York's fashion world, where his designs appeared in Vogue and on major runways. Ted Porter went from drawing floor plans as a child to designing acclaimed homes and spaces across America. And today, younger visionaries like Elizabeth and Braxton Coombs are restoring historic buildings and giving them new life. Preserving history is itself a creative act.
Another strong community program, our high school theater groups are winning big accolades with their musicals at the High School Orpheum Musical Theater Awards in Memphis, giving local youth big experiences. So what creates a creative spirit? Talent matters, hard work matters, but so does something else. A teacher who notices, a parent who encourages,
A church that gives a child a chance to sing, a library card, a used guitar, a notebook.
a town that says, "We believe in you." That is the deeper story of Union County.
That in a small Mississippi place where roots run deep and people still know your name, imagination can take hold. And when it does, it can travel anywhere in the world.
The people featured in this exhibit represent only part of a much larger story. Generation after generation, Union County has nurtured creative minds by offering something invaluable: roots, encouragement, opportunity, and a sense of belonging. From those gifts have come remarkable lives and remarkable work. The creativity keeps flowing.
Thank you so much. I have one more thing to say. When Jill had been gathering all this information, and when she sent it to me, it was 79 pages long. And I thought, okay, I started thinking, I thought, okay, a 10-minute script, that's 10 minutes long. And I hope it seemed like faster than 10 minutes. Because even when I watch, I think, well, that's zipping right by. But a 10-minute script is about 8 pages long, so I had to distill a lot. But I'm so glad that she did the work and found the images, and that we were able to collaborate and do this. So I thank you all for having me here today. I thank you all for trusting me with your story. And I can't wait to see the thing when it's done. And that'll be soon, right? All right. Thank you so much.